Greetings and welcome once more. It's I, Tantus Dracovin, your lord and emperor here of the Dracovin Empire, and we're diving back into Pathfinder again. Why? Because Golarion is a very interesting world that I love talking about and going over various things about. And today, we're going to talk about another ancestry that not only can you play in Pathfinder, but you might want to know about what they're doing in this world. Because they are a very interesting one to speak about. Goblins. The thing about goblins is they have a very tumultuous history. For many generations, they have been on the fringes of society, things that are violent against a lot of other humanoids, raiding against them, killing them, fighting them. They have been seemingly an enemy. But in the last couple of decades, a major shift has been occurring in many goblin groups. Goblins are changing their ways, in a way. Not that they necessarily walk away from what their people believe and their nature of their ancestry, but their society is evolving, and you're finding goblins being less on the outside of society, and more trying to find their way and becoming basically what could be considered more civilized. They're trying, at very least, to join the other civilized ancestries, the other humanoids of Golarion. You know, whether or not they're successful is up to the individual, but at least they're trying. You know, they're trying to, a classic role-playing trope. It's a goblin, it's an enemy. Not so much. Now you have to, look at it and pick it up, and it's like, am I throwing this in the enemy camp or the friend camp? And I'm not going to get started on goblin artwork, because there's jokes there. And we're not getting there. But let's suggest some books you can use, because I always like starting out with an important part of this entire thing about, if I want to do some research on my own, well, I can do a couple of different things. First off, I can always check out Archives of Nethys or the PSFR D20. Both of them contain information. Thirdly, you can always go to the Pathfinder wiki. Or, fourth, as I like to throw out here, you can check out some books. Now, there are really a lot of places that talk about goblins. I'm going to be honest, there are a billion places that you can get into goblins, talking about them in little bits here and there. But the two books I would suggest to give the most kind of chunk of stuff is, of course, the Inner Sea World Guide, and, of course, Goblins of Golarion. Now, this is a more classic one, so this is more goblins are not your friends kind of goblins. This is more old, early, Pathfinder. Again, in the last 2 decades, they've had some societal shifts. So this is like pre-societal shifts, but it still could be very helpful, as a lot of that goblinness still is there. So, they might be walking away from a lot of their ways, but there's plenty of them that still keep with some of those traditions there. So, a lot of times, goblins are seen as nothing more than murderous pests, unfortunately for them. They've been on the fringes of a lot of societies. They scavenge around the waste. Their societies are often built in squalor. They're pretty weak on their own, but their advantage in being goblins has always been numbers. They're very good at having a large group of them do things. And unfortunately, even as they're attempting to become more civilized, they're still kind of in those fringes a little bit. So they're short, kind of emaciating seeming a goblinoid, about the size of a halfling. Goblinoids being a kind of subgroup of humanoids that are related to each other. Just as a note, that would be in Golarion. The main ones are Goblin, Bugbear, Hobgoblin, Kijimura, and Monkeygoblin. So, the Goblins have also been generally seen as very barbaric for a lot of their actions and the way they've acted. Less so nowadays. That, again, is a lot of the changes recently happening. Hey, Blaze. So, they tend to be around 3 feet tall, flat heads, long ears, skin that tends to be leathery, gray, green, wrinkled, covered in scars, warts, scabs. They have very little, if any, hair. And their thick skin and huddling together keeps them warm if they need to. They have small, red, beady eyes that are kind of close together over a little kind of pug nose, and a mouth lined with sharp teeth that is kind of large. They, a lot of times, will dress in things like simple rags, scraps that cast off from other humanoids, or poorly cobbled together equipment. That's traditional Goblin as you kind of see it. Goblin genders, when it comes to other humanoid races, many humans in particular, tend to have trouble distinguishing the two of them. But they do have reproductive organs. They are separate. They have a male and female. But another thing to think about is when it comes to goblins, if you're looking to be beautiful in the eye of a goblin, female goblins see excessive weight as a sign of beauty. And the ideal of goblin sexuality is, in fact, an obese female Bargeist. Bargeist being basically a horrible wolf monster that is the face of a goblin. That's said to be related to them, like a cross between a wolf and a goblin. It might actually be one, who knows, really, but they're kind of really horrible. But yeah, so, heck, you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and they hecking have their own unique eye for this kind of stuff. Now, goblins are a species that mature rapidly. They reach adulthood in about 5 years and live up to be about 50 years old. The unfortunate thing for most goblins is violence is a way for the majority of them still. Even as goblin society is beginning to uplift itself, it's still a slow process. Many die before they reach 20. They have an incredibly high level of energy with accelerated metabolisms, and honestly, that doesn't help for their lifestyle and living long, and also just in general dangerous lifestyles. They are eating machines because of their high metabolism. They're stricken with a kind of constant hunger. The thing that they have as an advantage is they can subsist on pretty much anything organic. Their favorites are, of course, salty foods and pickled foods of all types are a personal favorite. Honestly, I do like a good pickle here and there, so I can understand where the goblins are coming with for this one. Now, we'll go for the that one there. It's a little bit more framed. So, goblins have this weird, almost pathological fear and hatred of both horses and dogs. And they have a mutual hatred displayed by these animals towards them. Almost the animals see them as a threat just by them existing. Goblins in this way are defined by their fears more than anything. They fear dogs and horses, but also to a degree humans. Their religion is based upon fear of their own gods, in fact. So it's an unfortunate thing that they're a skittish little species. They love treasures, but they value appearance over utility. A shiny but worthless trinket would be valued over some kind of powerful but ugly magic item. Goblin chieftains, and those that possess wits to make such items, are the exceptions. Like, a goblin chieftain will keep some powerful magic item because they will help them out, and those that make them will also know, but they tend to stash them away until they need them, kind of thing. Shiny treasures, though, means that a lot of times goblins will hang out in places like refuse pits, junkyards of any non-goblin settlement or place throughout the Inner Sea region, because, heck, that's a great place to pick up some treasures that someone else didn't want because they were fools. These are great treasures. They also are very good and adept at scavenging together items to craft into weapons and tools. They might not be great, but it is a unique skill of a goblin. I can throw together a bunch of crap and make something that's useful, at least for a period of time. They're just weirdly proficient at that entire thing. You know, master skill. Pick up junk and make something I can use. So, because they're skittish and have to live by their weird skills and wits, there is a bit of adventure in any goblin. A lot of them love to explore, hunt for treasures, and there are those that become true adventurers. They separate from their tribes or their whatever group there are. Things like alchemists and bards are popular. Alchemists because they love fire and songs, and bards because they love fire and songs. But things like rogues are often very big in their groups because, you know, they're scrappy survivors darting through shadows. And even because some of them are fairly charismatic, naturally, some of them become sorcerers too. So, that's the goblin there in a nutshell in a way. But we do have some history of goblins, as is told by goblins. So the first songs, as they're known, the goblin creation myths, say that goblins were created from human blood spilled by the 4 great goblin hero gods. From the most powerful Bargeist god, had Redgash, Goblish gained the gift of tribe, giving them strength in numbers. From his mate, Ven Kelvor, they gained the gift of raiding and learned to steal from other races. From Zagrangel, they gained the gift of riding to master wolves and other animals. And from Zogmut, they gained the gift of scavenging, harvesting the bounties of the seas Flotsam and Jetsam. So, goblins have since their inception, whatever it really may be, spread across Varisia. Some say as a plague, some say as a interesting inclusion in the Golarion Council of Intelligent Beings. Not all goblins are really got the intelligent part of it. There are those that do. They say that Zogmagut first walked into the sea in Varisia, so it's a very prominent place there. And of course in Eisger, where they were taken by Velkavor's wolves. So that's a thing we'll talk about. We'll talk about where they are in Golarion. Unfortunately for them, they've been beneath a lot of other species. Legions of goblins have been under the command of hobgoblin leaders. They've wreaked havoc in Eisger, the neighboring realms, during the Goblin Blood Wars. A conflict that lasted the 4 years from 4697 to 4601. The Goblins were defeated, but both sides had huge losses. The aftermath of the Goblinoid Wars has been what has caused, honestly, some of the civilization coming to the Goblinoid peoples, and even the goblins. It is the fact that these wars happen has, in fact, kind of had an effect here, interestingly enough. Now, let's talk about there's a nice map here of the various tribes of goblins in the inner sea regions. Yes, you too can see the many, many, many tribes that exist by name. These are the major tribal groups. So, goblins don't really build a lot of their own structures. They like using terrain and natural defenses to their advantage, like areas of heavy undergrowth, defensible caves, ruins, places that they don't have to do a lot, that they can build onto places. They don't build the main structures themselves. Scavenging is the main way they subside, and they are very good at surviving. They can survive in many hostile climates that a lot of other species would have trouble with. Their tribes usually tend to be a few dozen, led by a chieftain and a number of sub-chieftains, who most likely are the toughest individuals of the group. Mounts that they keep in settlements are wolves, wargs, goblin dogs, but they don't keep ponies, horses, or dogs, of course, because of their fear and hatred of them. Religion is an important place in many of these tribes. It has complex myths and legends that border on ridiculous to anybody that hears them from the outside, often fixating on shaped natural features. These make sense to the tribe that you're a member of. Their worship is simple, bloody rituals filled with howls, animal sacrifice, ecstatic dancing. They craft fetishes of bones of their enemies, particularly dogs and humanoids. The 4 great goblin heroes, as I mentioned, are the common objects of worshipers. There are those that worship Lamashtu, above all else, because she freed the goblin heroes from Asmodeus. Goblin tribes that worship one hero god to the exclusion of others are considered heretics in the eyes of the other tribes. But these 4 demigods that I mentioned were supposedly initially minor Bargeist heroes in service of Asmodeus. Yeah. Blame Lamashtu for their existence, honestly. God damn it, Lamashtu. God damn it. But they are the main deities of the Goblin people. So, goblins, when not at war, will amuse themselves with very sadistic games, inane but catchy songs, and they love arson. They love fire a little too much. They do have an irrational fear of writing, though the reason why people believe it stems from the contracts with Asmodeus to bind their Bargeist forebears. Some believe that the mere act of writing words steals them from one's head. Now, again, this isn't to say that Goblin society hasn't evolved since this kind of basic way. There's still love of fire, songs, and eating anything, and a hatred of, honestly, breeding dogs and horses. You know, some goblins will still learn to read, but they find it for necessity. They'll tolerate dogs and horses, but honestly, even goblins in the modern-day Golarion, where they've become a little bit more civilized, there are things that they just can't get rid of. Fire, a love of it. Devouring a mirror that might turn someone else's stomach. Playing with little trinkets and things that might be considered garbage or rubbish to someone else. And, you know, honestly, just giving a dog or horse a side-eye. You know it's planning something. It's gonna do something, you're ready for it. So, though you're having a pretty radical splintering of goblin culture from this initial basis into, like, combining a little bit of their old ways with more modern Golarion, you know, a lot of the reputation doesn't change because there's those little core nuggets of stuff which just doesn't go away and probably won't. You know, the side-eyeing of dogs and horses, fire. Lots of fire. So, certainly, goblins have improved a lot. They're not completely changed from their old ways, but, you know, they're finding their ways. So let's talk about the various locations and subgroups of goblins you can find in Golarion. So again, from the map before, they're inhabiting lots of areas of the Inner Sea region. This isn't the only map of them, but this is like a lot of the tribes that are known through a lot of books and stuff, so it's the best way to look at these. In Eisger, goblins live in the caverns of Chitterwood beneath the Chitterwood Forest. A large horde of them were organized and led by hobgoblins that poured out of the forest. They overwhelmed Eisger's army. They were eventually defeated by an alliance of Chelish Hell Knights, Eridan Eagle Knights, and Druma Mercenary League. The sides were devastated. The goblins were defeated. Most survivors fled back to the caverns which they came. There are still crafty, well-organized tribes, still led by hobgoblins plotting revenge from their caves. The True Horde, Spine Threshers, and People of the Sturge are those three of those major groups. Some Eisger goblins tribes also inhabit the mine tunnels beneath the town of Dustspawn. Those are some of the major groups. They're still connected with the goblinoid worlds. On the other hand, you have Meta-Ogothi Island, where the so-called Monkeygoblins of the Grundy Archipelago are native. We'll talk about them in a little bit more, but they're fierce warriors that defend the settlements of Gonda Uj against those incursions by native lizard folk, kobolds, and humans from the city of Ilsgamorthi. Monkeygoblins have a reputation of kidnapping trespassers, eating or sacrificing to their demon gods. they're kind of divided into a number of smaller tribes. We'll talk about Monkeygoblins again in a second, but there's songs like the Eggsucker tribe, the Net Hunting Not Snarl tribe, the Flotsam Gathering Long Lung tribe, Berserker Pulp Drool tribe, and the Dinosaur Riding Spikespur tribe. In Nearthamas, some goblin survivors of the Goblin Blood War fled north to Nearthamas and Lastwall, basically to get away from the trauma of the war. The Crooktoes tribe, whose more violent members had been slain by the war, basically the tribe fell under the falling of Chief Velkick, who had visions and dreams led by the tribe to worship Sarenrae. Now, the reason in 4719 the region was overrun by undead, and most of the tribe has migrated south to Absalom. But basically, Velvic is a Sarenrae worshipping goblin in Absalom, who used to serve as the chief, now is the current advisor to the chief, and the Crooked Toes are probably the most good aligned tribe of goblins you can find in the more that still have some tribalness. Shackles, cultures of pirate and anarchy, perfect for goblins. They do stay away from the larger islands where a lot of pirates hold sway. Isolated locales, a single tribe per island. They have a strong relationship with the sea, scavenging flotsam and shipwrecks. Some even build rafts, canoes, or crude ships of their own. There's Big Barb, Dark Hook, Reef Runner, and Squid Whistle tribes in that area. In Varizia, of course, goblins have a strong presence in the wild. A number of tribes call them the western regions homes, especially along the Lost Coast. Human settlements have forced them into conflict with these newcomers, like around Sandpoint. Of the 5 local tribes, the strongest are the Thistletop goblins, who take their names from the ruins of Thistletop, where they come from. Other ones are Bird Crunchers, Lick Toads, Mosswoods, and the 7 Tooth tribes, and a lot of minor tribes in that area. These are the main goblin homelands, you could call them. But there are minor tribes across the Inner Sea regions. There's the Snow-Loving, Frostfur, and Irison, the Painted Ghost Mask tribe in Niddle, the human-led Jordan's Volunteers and Cheliacs, the Shrieking Screamwing tribe of the Mwangi Expanse, the mutated Spell Eater tribe of the Mana Wastes, and of course the Bargeist-ruled Kingdom of Zog and the River Kingdoms is actually one of the few stable goblin nations that have a Bargeist ruling over them. But it unfortunately has recently had some kind of problems. Had some recent problems. By recent, I mean the last was one of the most foul stations. The Yellow Tongue sickness and an attack in 4217 had them mostly fall apart. So, let's speak of some subgroups that are kind of related to goblins, but not goblins. And we'll start with, of course, our good friends here, the Monkeygoblins. Let me get a bigger picture here. Does that look better? Yeah, Monkeygoblin. Woo, Monkeygoblin. So this is one of 3 subgroups of goblins I wanted to mention. They're the regional variant of goblins in the Mogatai Island. They're adapted to living in jungle canopies in their homelands. They have their treetop city of Grange Uj, which, I mean, it's a treetop layer of Monkeygoblins. That's the best way to say it. The scholars believe it's the 5th layer to exist, as the other 4 were burnt down by the Monkeygoblins because they're still fire-loving goblins. Nets, poison darts, they take prisoners, sacrifice it to whatever demons goblins worship. So be prepared for their entering their territory, Monkeygoblin territory. Similarly, also for a little bit more aquatic adventures, of course, is the Grindylow. Ah, yes, the Grindylow. They're kind of mer-goblins, is the best way to describe it, with the from the waist up goblin, from the waist down octopus. They are considered aberrations rather than humanoids, but they are kind of like goblins. Their top half is very goblin, so their Their head and mouth are a little bit more shark-like. So whether or not they actually are related to goblins or not, it's kind of like a question. But, you know, they have some very similar natures to that. And they're found in a lot of aquatic areas, especially tropical areas like the Shackles. But they also find their way all the way to the ice-rimmed reaches of the Ivory Sea in the Crown of the World. So they attack human merfolk settlements, passing ships. They hate dogs and horses, and even the domesticated goblin dogs, like, well, they hate goblin dogs and horses, like goblins, and domesticate goblin dogs, and domesticated goblin dogs. Oh no. Sorry. In the similar way that goblins hate dogs, horses, domesticate goblin dogs, Grindylow hates squids of all sizes and revere octopuses and devilfish. So they have a weird sort of connection there. And then there is one more group just to mention because they are a little bit more unique. It's a snow goblin. They have different... They're seen apart mainly by their pale blue skin. They're found in Arisen, around the Crown of the World. Arisen, pretty much just being snow goblin is the main thing to see about them. Their skin color is the main thing that's different about them. But anyway, that's pretty much all there is to say about goblins. It's a thing to say that, like, yeah, goblins have been around, and certainly if you look at tabletop RPG history, goblins have been an enemy to a lot of years. Certainly in more recent editions and stuff like that, playing something like a goblin has become more of an option, and you can see how goblins themselves have evolved. Especially in Golarion, you can see that a lot of the more recent things like the Hobgoblin Nation coming into being and being, like, honestly a lot more peaceful with their neighbors. The various wars and stuff, like the Goblin Blood War that happened more recently, have driven pockets of goblin civilization to become more civilized, to connect up with the other humanoids of the realms. It isn't to say that there aren't issues yet and there aren't conflicts. We still see a lot of tribal goblins out there, a lot of regions that are still tribal, violent, not to be messed with. But a lot of them are on the outskirts. They've been in areas that they don't have the same kind of connections with a lot of other humanoids, and honestly are to themselves. They're becoming less on the fringes of society, evolving, changing, is something more recent, and something that recent history has driven into their own culture. So their culture is dividing and evolving. Goblins as a people are changing. And yeah, they'll probably always love fire. They'll always probably eat whatever they can get a hold of, because honestly they can. And they'll probably always dick around with strange shiny objects that, you know, they can find at the drop of a hat out of refuse. But it doesn't mean a goblin can't be as smart or civilized as any other person next to them. They'll find their way in societies and maybe start building societies of their own. Maybe they will have an opportunity to become something different, to become something better. Something that, you know, finds better ways to love fire without burning down their lifestyle. And honestly, you know, less arson, less murder, less raiding. Hard to say. But looks like they're going that direction. Looks like things are getting better for the goblin people. Or at least they're going in a direction they can make things better for them. So, I hope you enjoyed learning about goblins. They are an interesting group that, it's like fun to play, have interesting quirks about them, and this new history of them that is honestly only a few decades old at most is definitely something to think about. That, where do you come from if you're ever playing Goblin? Where is the changes happening to it? Why have you become an adventurer? Is your tribe traditional? Is your tribe one of the new tribes? What's going on? There's a lot of questions you can ask about it when playing Goblin. And honestly, when it comes to Goblins and Golarion, it's that thing of where certainly, depending on where you are, you could say, see a goblin, and know, enemy. But there's a lot of places in the world now, a lot more of them, and more of them rising, that you see a goblin, you're like, friend or enemy? And I think that's a good thing now that you ask that question, because certainly, a lot of times, you give a passing human, or elf, or dwarf, or halfling, gnome, plenty of other intelligent humanoid species the benefit of the doubt when you see them. Goblins and some other humanoids have not been given that benefit of the doubt. But goblins and many of their kin now are finding ways to go above their brethren, to become better, to step away from their violent pasts and find new ways that honestly allow them to thrive more. And maybe, that average lifespan will no longer be 20. It'll start getting up towards that top end of 50. You can only hope they can actually live a long, fulfilling life and, not be violent, quick, and gone. So, we'll see. I'm fascinated to keep an eye out and see how the storylines evolve for Golarion, for the Goblin. I hope you enjoyed today. Remember, this goes up on YouTube, and it's live streamed on Twitch. If you're joining me on Twitch, follow, it always be wonderful. If you're watching this on YouTube, a good little subscription, ringing the bell, giving a thumbs up, leaving a comment. Have you played a Goblin character in Pathfinder or any other game system, and what did it mean to play that character, and what kind of world was it in? If it's in Golarion, how'd you play the Goblin? Especially things like first edition. Things weren't always as good for goblins as they are now in second edition. There's a lot of questions to ask about that, and to talk about it there. If you want to see what's going on with me, hear my thoughts and stuff, the website formerly known as Twitter or Discord are great places. There's links down below, both on Twitch and YouTube. My schedule for tabletop stuff is every Tuesday, Thursday in the afternoon, tends to be early afternoon, and Saturdays in the late mornings. If you're looking for other stuff, I have live plays of various tabletop games, Pathfinder 1st Edition in particular right now, and discussing my tabletop discussion every Saturday evening. Check out. I also do gaming streams over on Twitch if you want to check those out every time, where I just play random games for fun and chat a little bit. Anyway, I hope all of you enjoyed learning about goblins, had a great time, and learned a thing or two. And until, the next time, I'm going to say to all of you out there, have a great day, play some interesting characters, and enjoy more of Golarion. And until that next time, farewell to all of you out there.